She was warned. She was given an explanation. Nevertheless, she persisted.
Hello and welcome to The Persistence. This is She Who Persisted, the Nasty Podcast. My name is Beatrice and I'm here with...
Elizabeth.
As always. It's not a huge surprise.
No.
What is a huge surprise, though, is that we are now on Spotify.
Yay.
So the persistence paid off and we finally are on Spotify. What's also great is that both in Croatia and in Luxembourg, we were in the top 100 the last 2 weeks, which is really cool. So shout out to Croatia and Luxembourg.
We've also moved to a different web podcast host. We have moved from Blog Talk Radio to Sprecher. So if there are problems with the feed or any issues, let us know. We think that we have probably gotten everything updated where it's supposed to be updated, but you never know.
I think so. I think we've updated everything. Also, if you're hearing this, then you probably have access to the newest feed because...
Right.
You're hearing this, so it's fine.
There's that
it's
too.
Fine. Yeah. Don't forget that we have a Facebook group. It's called Persisters, the She Who Persisted group. And the reason why we keep annoying you with this is that the great thing about podcasts is that it's kind of a media where you can create a community around it, you know? I really love that. And so we would really love for this Facebook group to be more active and to just get in touch with you. So if you want to tell us anything, or if you want to discuss the topics that we discuss here, or want to talk to other listeners, then that's really a great place to be. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And we have talked a little bit about book recommendations that we've gotten on the Facebook group. And I think that kind of in the new year, we'll probably start looking more at book clubby, book recommendation-y type stuff. Once we get through a few of the other exciting episodes that we have coming up for you, interviews with people and such.
Yeah, there's actually a lot planned. So yeah, there's a lot to be excited about. So thank you for listening. Thank you to the people in Croatia and Luxembourg, most particularly. Continue whatever it is that you're doing. So please continue telling all your friends. Please continue to rate and review. We really love... You know, in the last few weeks, a lot of great things happened for our podcast, and we're really excited about that.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about what we want to talk about today. So we are in the midst of a series on menstruation.
Yes.
And we wanted to do an episode about periods in pop culture. And then I started researching, and
it's too much.
I sat down. Too much again. That's the problem. So there's also a feedback that we got is that our episodes are too scripted, that we're too prepared, which also is because of my anxiety of being underprepared.
I'm sorry. No, it's not just your anxiety. We're academics. We like to be prepared for things. Like, we like to research and we like to be prepared for things. And
we like to know our shit.
Yeah, we'd like to know our shit and be able to back our shit up. So that's part of it. But it's constructive feedback. It's helpful to know that people would like for us to have a conversation and not feel like they have to take notes. Though, you know what? Take notes if you want.
Yeah, but I think, I'm very thankful for the kind of feedback that we got, because I think it's actually useful. I think that,
sure,
I like podcasts that are very conversational. So maybe we were too professorial in a sense,
I am a professor.
I know. It's true. Okay. So I sat down, did too much research, and but what I did before I did too much research was that I thought about the examples that I know from pop cultural artifacts that I consumed that feature menstruation in some way. And I could not think of examples outside of the genre of horror film.
Sure. That makes perfect sense.
So, yeah. And one song by Lily Allen. So that was it.
Actually, there's a song from Germany in the 90s, and I don't remember who the singer was, but the song was Ich fühl mich always ultra und alles kotzt mich an. I think the song is actually always ultra.
Yes! I remember. Okay, so.
So yeah,
yes,
it's a female.
It's tic-tac-toe.
Yes, thank you.
It was like, oh god, tic-tac-toe was a huge, successful girl band, like a trio, in the 90s in Germany and Austria, and they were called tic-tac-toe, and they did a lot of those like girl empowerment songs.
I mean, and that was a time in it, like worldwide, I feel like, that was all about like girl power, kind of Gen X girl power, and so you get a lot of like riot girl bands and things like that, but that's the only other kind of pop culture German reference that I've got from the 90s that is always ultra.
That's such a good reference. I did not remember that, but now that you started quoting it, it just came to mind again, and it's amazing. I love tic-tac-toe.
Yeah, it's
and there was song. When they broke up, there was like this huge drama. I don't remember the details, but yeah. But, you know, there's not a lot of examples, right? And the thing that came to my mind first was the Stephen King film adaptation, Carrie. So that's one thing that I want to talk about today. And I thought about both the 1976 and the 2013 version.
You know, there's also a 2002 made-for-TV version that
Carrie
was shown
2.
in the United States. No. This is a made-for-TV movie that is basically Carrie. It is Carrie, but it was just shown on television, not in movie theaters.
So someone came up with a great idea of taking a very successful, like, movie theater film and making it into a shitty TV movie.
You know, as TV movies go, it's not that shitty. I've watched it because it's available if you're in the United States and you have Amazon Prime and you want to stream the 2002 TV movie version of Carrie, it is available, as is the 1976 version. Both of those are available streaming. The 2013 version and Carrie 2 is also available streaming. I think it's called The Terror.
I didn't see that.
And but the 2013 one you have to rent basically, and it's $2.99 for standard definition, which isn't bad. That's fine.
It kind of makes sense that the only examples that came to my mind are from horror films, because we live in a culture, and we've talked about this in a previous episodes, that just vilifies menstruation and menarche and period blood. Yeah. And then horror films often deal with things that are considered taboo or monstrous or abject. And then also generally the genre that features blood a lot is a horror film. So it kind of makes sense that it also features menstrual bloods.
Yes.
So one thing that came up in my research was, again, this connection of menstruation as something simultaneously terrifying, but also terrifying because it's somehow something magical. So it's supernatural and natural at the same time. And remember what Pliny the Elder wrote about menstruation in the first part of the series? He constructed menstruation as something magical and therefore scary. So he wrote that women, when they menstruate, are capable of killing like whole, whole beehives.
Yes, they make the earth basically barren. They send dogs into a frenzy. You know, the usual. Yeah.
Dim the brightness of mirrors, blunt the edge of steel, take away the polish from ivory. A swarm of bees, if looked upon by her, will die immediately. Brass and iron will instantly become rusty and emit an offensive odor, while dogs, which may have tasted of the matter so discharged, are seized with madness, and the bite is venomous and incurable. So we talked about this in the first part of our menstruation series, which was on period shame. We've talked about the construction of menstruation as both powerful and horrible in our episode about menstruation taboos last time, and we will talk about it today because it comes up in Carrie a lot. Again, as I said, there is a version from the year 1976 and 2013, and I think it makes sense to first talk about the version of 1976. And it was directed by Brian De Palma, and the second one was directed by Kimberly Peirce, which I think makes difference because the first Carrie is a very masculine vision of femininity and menstruation and all of that.
Sure. I mean, the story itself, because it's a Stephen King story, it's necessarily, there are, it's going to be tinged by his writing, by the way that he perceives female characters. And he has a whole series of books that are about kind of young girls and teenagers coming into their own and the terror that they wreak. So like Firestarter and Carrie are two examples of that.
Yeah. But it's not just something that is specific to Stephen King. I mean, this is a trope that comes up in horror film and horror fiction and just generally in pop culture again and again, just women as monstrous, especially, coming of age, like females that are just entering womanhood in a sense. That those seem to be very, very terrifying. And that's a trope that comes up over and over again. Mm-hmm. And one of the theorists that I work with a lot, also in my dissertation, which is on a different topic, is Barbara Creed. And she wrote a book that I really love. It's called The Monstrous Feminine, Film, Feminism, and Psychoanalysis. And that book was written in 1993. And she, in that book, analyzes the depiction of women as monstrous, particularly in horror films, and how the female body is constructed as terrifying, or actually the sexual female body is terrifying, and especially the female reproductive system, right? And she comes up with several categories of monstrosity or monstrous women in horror film. And for her, Carrie is an example of the witch character. Okay. But before I tell you what she wrote about Carrie, if you're interested in the subject of witches, we have a lot to offer because we did also a whole series on that subject last year at Halloween. So check out episodes 7 to 11, I think, for some witches. So Barbara Creed says, and again, this is something we already talked about in the last episode, there is a connection in our culture between periods and the idea of magic, most importantly period blood or menarche, or first period blood, and magic or the supernatural.
And we've seen that in the taboos that we have looked at in our previous episode about how they are connected with either an intensification of magic or the ability to disrupt magic. Yeah. And of course, I mean, horror films or whatever cultural artifact doesn't just, exist in a vacuum. Of course, those ideas stem from somewhere else. And as we showed in the last episode, those menstrual taboos are very ingrained in our culture. And I think horror films are one of the ways that it expresses itself, right? Yeah.
So yeah, and she says that there is this implicit idea that women's evil powers are also part of her feminine nature. So she's closer to nature, woman is closer to nature, and can therefore control or manipulate nature, and that's why she's scary. So she's both kind of supernatural and natural. And she says, quote, "In some horror films, the witch's supernatural powers are linked to the female reproductive system, particularly menstruation. It is interesting to note that despite the range of subjects covered in the maternal melodrama and the woman's film, menstruation is not one. It is to the horror film that we must turn for any direct reference to women's monthly cycle." So maybe it's not a surprise after all that. The only examples that I came up with are from horror films. Apparently, Creed had the same problem.
Sure. I mean, there are a lot of references in like television shows, and, to girls, especially long running television shows where there's a young girl who comes of age and all that are not horror movies. And I'm thinking specifically, in Mad Men, there's the, Sally Draper, gets her period and is kind of wondering what's going on with that. And it's one of the only times in that show where you actually see a tender moment between Sally Draper and her mother. Because otherwise her mother Betty Draper is kind of an awful, overbearing mother. But, she was raised that way too. So, generational trauma, etc. But yeah, I mean, it's often something that you get with like teenagers in television shows that, young girls coming together. You had it a lot. You get it in books of teenagers, especially. And I think I mentioned this before. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which was this like, 60s, 70s-ish